Thank you for joining me again today on this Teaching Thursday. I am Pastor Earl Simmons of Bright and Morning Star Community Church of Petersburg, Virginia. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about accountability. We're going to talk just a smidgen about responsibility. And then we're going to also talk a little bit about leadership. So, here in the book of Exodus, chapter 32, is where we're going to sum up just a couple of these scriptures, and we're going to relay it to the importance of leadership by itself, but also conferring some of the duties to someone who you trust, someone who you respect, and someone not just who you believe has leadership potential and experience, but you're also entrusting them to convey all of the responsible matters, if you will, of leading someone to a better way of how they need to accomplish responsibilities in life. Leadership is just one of those guiding principles to influence, all right, to help change or encourage the greater impact of someone's success in their life because they may not always have the right tools, even though they have tools. Some tools that they have may half or halfway give them exactly what they are trying to obtain. And that's not always necessarily the case. They may have a plan, it may not be a plan that could represent the best in which they are trying to offer and ultimately endure because they have to maintain it. So, here in the book of Exodus, chapter 32, we're going to talk a little bit about Aaron, the priest, the Levitical priest, whom was actually chosen by God in the priesthood. He was the one who God chose to be the priest of the children of Israel. So here now, beginning at verse 1 in chapter 32, it reads, Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And Aaron said to them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. So all the people broke off the earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. hmm Then they said, This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Aaron, of course, built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Sadly enough, but understandable, that the people pretty much just gave up on Aaron. Psychologically, if someone has done something great for quite some time and then disappeared and you did not hear from them for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, it's just sad to see that they just gave up on their leader Moses when he went up to talk to God. And right off the bat, even though it does not specifically say in the Bible, they gave up on the one person that God entrusted to bring the people up out of Egypt. But going back to Aaron, Aaron caved in to peer pressure. He didn't cave in for any other reason. He just wanted to make way for the people. Looking at it from another perspective, he wanted to maintain his own identity with the people as being someone whom they believe cared. But Aaron pretty much did something that was really terrible. It was a profane act of turning away from the Lord. But this is what the scientists say about the largest and most complex part of the brain. And we're going to do this in a little bit more depth, just hanging there with me. The forebrain is the largest and most complex part of the brain, responsible for higher cognitive functions, sensory processing, voluntary movement, and regulation of vital internal processes, meaning your organs, your blood flow, your heart pumping. But the brain, the people say you only use 1% of your brain, and I really can't believe that we use 10%. I believe it's more like the 1% because the brain is so compact with powerful senses and nerve endings that is just mind boggling, right? When you talk about the frontal forefront of your brain, that's the majority of your brain. Everything is pretty much up front and on top. The forebrain, also called the prosencephalon, right, is the anterior most and largest division of the vertebrate brain, making up the majority of the human brain's mass and surface area. It is one of the three primary brain divisions along the midbrain and the hindbrain. The forebrain is crucial for complex cognitive activities, sensory integration, voluntary motor control, okay, and regulation of the internal bodily functions. With that said, the people came to Aaron and they just simply told him, "Come make us gods that shall go before us." The majority of the people are leaning toward where they've come. They're used to worshiping other gods because they've seen and been around the Egyptians, and we're talking 400 years. Habitually, that is an actual habit that's just ingrained in you because they've been around this environment for so long. So it is going to take longer, perhaps, for them to get away from that kind of lifestyle. When you talk about you, the individual, and we're looking at trying to get people, encourage them, influence them to look to God after they have been raised in an environment where likely there was no godly influence, no spiritual discernment whatsoever. And this is how we say they're the unchurched, or they were just so ungodly. But to them, what else did they believe in other than living on the successes in which they had, right, brought in by themselves? They don't know God. They really don't know how to worship, let alone pray. They might say some things, or they might believe that there is a higher power, but they don't know God Almighty, the true and living God. These people did. But Aaron gave in to peer pressure And he gave in to peer pressure, not just to please the people, but also to accommodate their feelings, even though it was not a good decision. But listen to this, because the ventral stratum, this is and also another part of the brain in which you use every day. It helped me to understand why people give in to peer pressure, because it's not just a feeling. Okay, this is something that the brain has already been accustomed to, simply because of who you are as a person, wanting to be loved, wanting to be accepted, the very things that God has put in us. That's the reason why we're having so many difficult moments, and the people that we're having to deal with in this present status in this administration, because they're using the very foundations that was created in us to be justice, to be equality, and to be diversified. They're going to use it against us because of this very same thing. But this corpus stratum is a large, deep seated structure within the forebrain. It serves as the main entry port of information into the basal ganglia system. This dense collection of interconnected nerve cell clusters acts as a central hub that integrates signals for nearly all areas of the cerebral cortex, right? We're talking about the frontal part of the brain, including sensory, again, motor, limbic regions. By processing this vast input, the stratum plays a fundamental role in selecting which behaviors to perform, which to suppress, orchestrating voluntary movement, habit forming, motivation, and decision making. All of these work together for the sake of you just doing what you believe to be as right. It puts you in a good mood, puts you in a good feeling. It makes you acceptable, right? Part of Maslow's theory of not just being loved, but wanting to be loved and being accepted, the basic necessities of life, food, water, shelter, clothing, all of those things, as basic as it is, plays a major part in how you move forward every day. Because if the dynamics, right, okay, of your clothing, if it does not appear to people, if your threads aren't modern, people are going to shun you. If your fashion, right, doesn't have a swerve to it, you got to fight the process of being not just totally disrespected, but disregarded because you don't look the part. If you don't speak the lingo, people really don't want to jive with you because they feel that if they talk to you, you may not necessarily understand them. Understand when your peers reject you, and we fear rejection, and that's just psychological. That's just, we want to be accepted, we want to be liked, we want to be in the mix, we want to be popular, because that is how we feel that we gain a greater influence. I mean, you look at Facebook, look at TikTok, look at Instagram, look at Snapchat, look at all these social programs, and how people now are trying to accumulate followers. That's the thing. You got 10 followers, people don't really want to, you just somewhere out there. You got 200 followers, you're getting somewhere. You get 1,000 followers, you really begin to make a name for yourself. For those who come up with 10,000, a million followers, that makes them very, very poignant, because people are paying attention to what they're saying or what they're doing. Here we're talking well over a million people, the Israelites coming out of Egypt. So Aaron wasn't going to stand up to them by themselves, but he did not miss the point to accommodate them. Our leadership and how we perform and do the things that God has put us in charge to do does not weigh on the people, it weighs on God because he has exalted you before the people. Aaron, though a priest chosen by God, was just a mouthpiece. God exhibited Moses out in front of the people as the one to lead the people out of the land of Egypt, out of the land of bondage. And sometimes, if we don't believe that our leaders are being justifiable to us, whether he is speaking to our heart through his messages on Sunday, whether he is catering, okay, the outreach programs to our ideas, we get kind of hurt, we get kind of ticked off, and we really act as though we don't want to participate. But the fact of the matter is, a servant leader should not have to worry about all of that. If God chose you to be in a particular position because he has established you in that office, you have a duty to uphold. You have a responsibility. You are being held accountable. And scholars even suggest that later on in his life, the reason why Nahum and Abihu, his sons, were consumed by God when they offered profane fire is part of the reason that stemmed from his decision of making this golden calf. Aaron also later died before reaching the promised land. So there are still some lingering and after effects on the decisions that we make as leaders. It holds value here in the Old Testament. It also holds value in the New Testament because there were those in the New Testament who became martyrs. The difference is they stood, with the exception of the son of perdition, Judas Iscariot, who sold to the Pharisees a kiss to identify Jesus. All of the rest of them were martyred. They died in a manner in which displayed their believing in Jesus Christ. And that's ultimately what we do. If you are a leader in the church, you are bound by God choosing you to uphold what you know to be is biblically right because of the covenant in which you have engaged in God. But by his grace and his mercy, he'll still allow you to continue. But somewhere down the road, we're still held accountable for our actions, for our decisions, for the words in which we speak, the missions in which we chose not to pursue for whatever reason. We're still held accountable. Even though God's loving kindness and his grace and his mercy will keep us along that path, but we still have to answer for that. And that's what Aaron did. So when it comes to someone leaving you in charge because God has put them there with you to help matters, to be an assistant to you, to help lead the charge, if something should happen to the point man or the senior pastor, someone there should always go and do the right thing, not to assume all that responsibility on your own. You pray, you ask, and you seek God. You get the congregation to pray with you that the Lord would reveal himself as to direct you to the place of how you need to get to. Asking for the person to be sent by God, to be recognized, that the mission will move forward because you may not necessarily be that person that is going to move the mission forward. You very well may be, but you pray and ask God to reveal the next leader that is going to move you forward into the next phase of your mission. Understand these are missions with different phases to accomplish the same purpose of where they started. and that is to proclaim the good news to all the nations, being my witnesses, starting here in Jerusalem, that they were going to go into the promised land. They were going to be an example for people to follow. That's all I have for now. And I hope you got a little bit about leadership. I hope you understand how your brain functions because you make certain decisions, you make certain movements, and it's all attributed to that brain in which God, he said he breathed into the nostrils of man, and man became a living soul. There's no way, shape, form, or fashion on earth one person could ever unveil the mystery of the brain more so than God because he created you. Thank you for joining me here today. We're going to see you back here next Thursday, right? Enjoy the rest of your week. Be safe. Keep praying. And we're going to keep praying for you in Jesus' name.